Hello everybody, I am Jeff.iNcontroL Robinson from Team Evil Geniuses, and I'm going to be doing a tips and tricks with you guys. This is of course Protoss play, and we're going to be talking about a strategy that opened up, didn't work out so well, and then where we go from there. And in doing that, I want to talk about a couple of concepts, namely when do we stop making Colossus and why, and how do we read our Terran opponent during the battles, and where do we go from there. So hopefully that stuff entertains you guys, helps some of you out. Maybe you disagree with some of the stuff I talk about, but in my opinion, the conjecture itself is actually worth something for you guys. So hopefully this is just an educational experience for everybody. But before we get there, let's give some big love to BeyondGaming.com, or Beyond Gaming, excuse me. So you can find them at that website that I just said out of order. But do check them out. They're producing some great stuff. They're helping us educate the masses with StarCraft II. And then also show some love to EG.net. That is, of course, the website home base for Evil Geniuses. But before I stumble on any more of my words, let's just go ahead and get into the StarCraft game. Okay, so the map is Xel'Naga Caverns. I am the red Protoss player, and my opponent for this replay is going to be Spades from Team Rain. This is played on the Korean server, though, so his name in this case is the ever so awesome Haunted. But the opening we're going to see today is it's an opening. If you watch my stream, if you've seen some of my commentaries, you've heard me talk about this. I like to call it my special tactics. It's basically the same concept, the same strategy that one Mr. Whiteraw utilizes in a lot of his gameplay, and it's very warp prism dependent. The idea behind this strategy is, hey, it looks like I'm doing a one-gate expand. You are probably macroing, but then all of a sudden, boom. 4 Zealots, 4 Stalkers, and a whole bunch of other stuff is inside your base wreaking havoc. But before we get there, let's just go ahead and talk about the beginning of a typical PvT game. One of the best chunks of advice Mr. DeMuslim has ever given me is he said, chrono boost your probes, and chrono boost your probes. And of course, a lot of you are going, LOL. It's like the most basic thing ever. I knew that since I was in Silver League. Well, it might seem basic, but a lot of us actually do trickle off those chrono boosts on things like getting our second Stalker out faster, or triple chrono boosting warp gate upgrade, that kind of stuff. But DeMuslim really helped me kind of come to grips with the fact that if you just have more probes in the early game, you're actually keeping pace and sometimes even surpassing your Terran opponent. And of course, that is in exchange for fewer units off the gateways, but also slower warp gate upgrade. But he kind of argued with me and won me over on the fact that what exactly does fast warp gate accomplish for us as Protoss players? Of course, it is paramount to defending against some kind of huge aggression from the Terran. So if he wants to proxy some racks or just straight up walk units from across the map, in those situations, of course, we want the faster upgrades. So that's why it's so important to scout and then react to that scouting. If I don't see something that makes me feel like I'm in danger, I should not be chrono boosting out upgrades or units. I really should just be focusing on the fact that in this situation, it's better to have more probes. So sometimes I kind of stray from that logic because I'm, still trying to learn. But at the end of the day, hopefully that tip will help you guys out as well. At the very least, experiment with it. I really think it's worth your time. Of course, if you're sitting down across from Nest T or something like that, don't experiment then. But do experiment while you're laddering or practicing or something like that. So right now, here's a concept that you guys are probably growing bored of hearing me harp about, but it's so important to me. This probe needs to stay outside of your base, and it needs to continue to give information to you. So in this case, I'm saying, okay, just seeing 1 Marine, no expansion just yet. That's the best that I can do. But additionally, this probe should do things like secure the towers, make sure he doesn't have them, and make sure I do. He can drop pylons in like these kind of locations so that later in the game, if he takes this base, I can warp in on it. Or if I attack over here, I can warp in from here. But the main idea here is that I have options. If that probe goes home, I do not have those options, and we are in trouble. Now let's go ahead and talk about the build. This is just your typical one-gate, quote-unquote, expand. That's what I want him to think. And I actually whiff on this SCV pretty bad here, so he kind of knows nothing's going on. And then you go Robo, and this is all off of 1 gas. I am, in fact, not building anything else, but then dun dun dun, a total of 4 gateways. So it's really important he doesn't get inside my base. That's why there's, kind of an intention at the front there. But even just not seeing a Nexus go down at that time, Spades is such a good player that he's saying, okay, something's afoot. Normally a Nexus would go down in that situation, so I'm not quite sure what I'm facing. So he's going to pump out quite a few units here before he ever thinks about going. He's got conch shells coming in. Meanwhile, for me, I've just got both the towers. Warp prisms being chrono boosted out, or at least finished off. There we go. It's just about the same time Spades decided, okay, I'm going to go out here and see what's up. And whoop, probe dies, but not in vain. Gateways are opening up, so in a second here, I'm going to warp in. Well, actually, because his army's moving out, I might determine that I need to save myself first. Nope. I'm going to go with a drop, then to save myself. Sometimes you can actually afford to just go ahead and warp in a couple sentries there. But Spades is really smart. Look at that scan. Look at what he saw. Saw everything. So he's not going to attack. Screw that. That's way too dangerous. I'm going to go back home and defend. So bunker goes up. His army's there. My Warp Prism's like, la-di-da, this is so great. Oh, no. There's his whole army. So I can't attack that, right? What would 4 Zealots do against that? They just die. Spades is already almost finishing his command center. He's got a factory going down. He's ahead in tech. He's just, in every way, shape, or form, he is advantaged in this game. Now, this is a really important thing to talk about because this will happen to us. Unfortunately, well, actually, I say unfortunately, but really it's just me that wants to win every game. Games aren't going to go our way, is I guess the point I'm trying to make here. So sometimes there's going to be situations where it's like, okay, how do we make best from this situation? How do we salvage this? Where do we go from here? Now, I opened up Warp Prism. I hedged a lot of my bets. I didn't have a second gas. I don't have additional tech. I'm a little bit in a tough situation here. But what I do have is a Warp Prism loaded up with some Zealots. And that is actually pretty scary for a Terran player. Even if they have this giant army that absolutely would trounce all over that, he is worried about force fielding this ramp. He is worried about Zealots in the mineral line. He's worried about an army showing up here. The Terran player has concerns, and I have made those concerns greater by utilizing the Warp Prism. So I need to make sure that he knows that I have this Warp Prism. I need to make sure that he knows that. Yes, that is what I'm trying to say. So there we go. Back at home, I'm cutting a few corners. I've taken my second gas. I only have a few units, right? This is not an army to speak of at all. The idea here is that I'm going to intimidate him to keep him close to home while I make a beeline to the Colossus. If I can get the Colossus out, I can take angles on his army and shoot through these Marines and then deal with the Marauders with something else. So here comes the Observer. It's going to go ahead and inform me that I am not as far behind in terms of economy as I thought I was. And this honestly should be fluttering a little bit more in this space, somewhere where it's safe not to die to like a stim, but enough to let Spades know, hey, if you leave your base, this is coming in. Meanwhile, Colossus en route. There it is. There's another probe, and this is so important. Lose that first probe? Fine, I'll send a second one out here. But what is unacceptable is to not have the ability to build proxy pylons around the map. Warping in on this base, like I said earlier, warping in here, so big, scouting this for like a hidden expansion, all these things, well worth the cost of 100 minerals. Could potentially win you some games. So I expect to see frivolously placed pylons from the moment you guys see this video and onward. So I'm getting good information from this Observer, kind of see a lot of Marauders. I mean, this is scary stuff because I don't have a big army. Holy crap, just one Colossus coming out. Not a big army at all. Now, a lot of you are looking at this and saying, well, if he just attacks, doesn't he win here? No, not necessarily. Force fields in Colossus allow me to take good defensive positions on him, but also the Warp Prism is a fear that he has. Now, we're going to see this put to the test. Here goes his army. I know he left, so that's when I come in. This is doing pretty good damage. And they're just going to go to work on those SCVs, but this poor Warp Prism ends up getting countered. I mean, Spades, great multitasking. Catches me trying to do a double-pronged attack, and then this guy is stuck forever until he dies. So that's the end of an era, if you will. He now knows that he's fairly safe, he being Spades. Not worried about a Warp Prism attack, but at this time I have 2 and heading to 3 Colossus. And I'm looking at his army with this observer and I'm saying, okay, there's actually no Vikings to speak of. So as long as I keep his guys off my Colossus, I should always win that fight. And I'm chrono boosting, I want to defend, and here it comes. And then there it goes. And I say, whoa, 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 whoa. Where are you going? We need to have fun with this. So my 3rd Colossus pops out, and it's time to go. And again, there's those probes scouting the expansion, pylon there. Great to warp in for here, but also for here. And we're going to have an engagement. Now, I want us to look at a couple things here. Let's look at this army. 3 Colossus, you know, a handful of Zealots. We got 7 there. A handful of Stalkers, only 5. A handful of Sentries, only 4. This is not a juggernaut Protoss army. And it's going up against a big Terran army that's even ahead in supply. Okay? And that's not just Harvesters. In fact, I have more Harvesters than he does. This is mostly in army. Now, there's a couple things we need to talk about. When you're fighting a Terran army, it is so much better to be up against a wall or in a narrower space because we have more force fields doing, or excuse me, fewer force fields doing more for us. If we can force field a few locations and really block down that Terran army, then we can go ahead and secure much better angles for ourselves, even forcing him to stack his units on top of each other so that the area of effect damage from the Colossus can just do that much more damage. But I actually make kind of a bold choice and say, you know what? Narrow spaces be damned. Let's go fight in the middle of this map. And that's not necessarily the best choice. It's going to come down to force fields. And those are great force fields. Not overlapping too much. These two obviously are way too involved. But the idea was that he'd have to funnel himself through those holes and then take extra damage, but also run the risk of being held in by the force fields. Now this pylon's really key so I can warp in with this army, because it essentially is a 2-base push, right? Here comes the 4th Colossus. And there's those force fields again. And I'm running out of anti-air, so this is a little bit dangerous here, because he's got Vikings. And that's what kind of makes me think, huh, okay, well, it's cool I killed this whole army, but rather than push the issue, even though I know he doesn't have a whole lot, let's pull back here. And let's get some more anti-air in there so I don't just die, right? I don't want to just lose these Colossus. They're kind of my backbone here. So here he comes. And here comes the good old Terran pull. And what little anti-air he does have is enough to finish off my Colossus. And then he's lost this expansion spot. So everything seems pretty hunky-dory for us Protoss players. I've got the advantage of having him blocked away like this. Then I try to push the issue and get up that ramp. And that's not going to work. Too much of a block off, too good of an angle for him. I'm just going to be happy with the fact that he's almost mined out, and he's in a lot of trouble. Of course, after one last try. Let's get out of here. Okay, so we pull back. Now, Protoss players from that point forward, how do we play with the lead? And this is a really important concept I want to talk about. Now, let's call a spade here. No pun intended, real quick. I'm really ahead, okay? I'm ahead in supply. I'm ahead in army. I'm ahead in positioning. I'm not going to try to make this sound like it's the closest game ever and then explain to you guys why I make these amazing decisions. Okay, that would be really stupid. I think everyone kind of recognizes that I'm really ahead here. But what I do want to talk about is the decisions we make in Protoss versus Terran regardless. So detach yourselves from this game just a little bit. I wish I was, showing a closer game so that we could actually talk about this a little bit better. But the decisions are still sound, and I want to talk about why they would function even in a closer game. Now, first and foremost, he knows I'm going Colossus. I opened up a 2-base Colossus push, which means a lot of gateways, just one robo, but a lot of chrono boost on that Colossus, so that I push with 3 or 4 Colossus and a lot of support from things like Stalkers, Sentries, and Zealots. There should be no upgrading going on. Most of your money should be funneled down into those units, and that's pretty much that. Now, I accomplished my goal. I killed his army, I smashed his natural, and I shoved the Terran up into his base. What I didn't do is win the game. It's not over. He is crippled. He's not dead. So even if it were a closer game, but let's say like I just killed his army and he still had his natural, and I'm still in danger of losing this game, the decisions I'm about to talk to you guys about is still applicable, especially the Colossus one, and I want to go there now. So I have I think it's just 1 Colossus out, right? Yep, just 1 Colossus, a second one coming out. Now, what's really in vogue for Protoss players these days, right now, is to cut off their own Colossus production at like 3 or 4 Colossus off of 2 base, sometimes 3. And the reason we do it on those bases is because in order for a Terran player to counter 2 or 3 Colossus, they can't have just like 2 or 3 Viking. They have to have like 5 or 10. And sometimes, if you put the real fear in them, or they just are scared of Colossus anyways, you'll have 3 Colossus and they'll have 20 Vikings. This is really, really good for us as Protoss players as long as we're playing behind that. So I don't want to have 6, 7, 8 Colossus, have the guy make 20 or 30 Vikings and then just shut them down. I want to have 2 or 3 so that he has to pay or sometimes overpay in countering them while I'm actually doing something else. So I switched to Double Forge, Twilight Council with Charge, and then even Templar for Psionic Storm, or perhaps just Archons. Either one is totally fine. But the idea here is that in order for a Terran to properly take all of those into account, he has to go Ghost, Double Engineering Bay, and Vikings. And if he has any kind of a crippled economy, or if he's hedged his bets in one direction or another, he is going to fall behind in some facet of the game. It's just going to put a lot of taxing on him, and it's very reactive dependent on Terran. Sure, Terran can just blindly make Vikings, Ghosts, and double upgrade, but in particular with the Ghosts or the Vikings, they might end up overemphasizing one versus the other, or worse, underemphasizing. Like, let's say he only makes 5 Vikings, and I do go 8 Colossus. Now he's dead. Or if he makes 20 Ghosts, but I make, 8 Colossus. I guess the point I'm trying to make. He's in a lot of trouble. So those decisions that I make in this game, not nearly as critical because I'm so far ahead, but in a closer game, that's what will make or break your success. Now, as you can see, I've squeezed my money down to a very small number. And that's not by going Colossus. That's by building as many Zealots, Templar, and Archons, Zealots, as well as Stalkers, that I possibly can. I still have the 2 Colossus, so it's not like I had to sell them or something like that. They're still there. But the rest of my army has that extra punch in it. Now, Spades did not overkill on the Vikings. He's got 7 now. And he's going to stop building because he did a good scan. So Spades, like I said, is a very high-level player. He's making pretty good choices given what he's got. But other players perhaps won't make those decisions, and you will feel twice as clever. Now, here's the nice thing. Once I get my economy going, got a 3rd base up. I know I'm ahead in every facet of the game. Why not double robo? Let's swing back to this Colossus. He's going to cut Viking production. The next time we fight, he's going to lose those Vikings. And then I show up with 4 or 6 Colossus again, and he's in trouble again. So I'm just moving around with these Stalkers, kind of making sure no scout scouts me out. I'm sitting on the high yield. I'm happy as a peach. Peaches are really happy. And I know that this Terran player probably only has one more attack left in him. So I hope I don't expand. That'd be kind of foolish. I'm in position to expand, but I don't want to do it yet because why expand when I know that the Terran player's really got one more attack in him? That base won't come up in a time that helps me. So I've switched back to Colossus. And the reason, again, that I switched back to Colossus is because I'm ebbing and flowing with my tech, and I'm forcing him to try and keep pace. 2-2's about to finish for me. His upgrades are non-existent because he just simply can't afford them, or at least that's the choice he made. And he's going to have a couple of ghosts, and he's just going to go for it. That's kind of his game plan. But these pylons and this zealot let me know, okay, there's no expansion. There's no base possible for him to take, right? I got pylons everywhere. Not seeing things like SCVs heading to the high yield, none of that stuff. And then it gets to a certain point where it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll just expand anyways. I'm almost maxed. Why not? Even if the money is not being spent towards my army at this point in time, I can't. So storms incoming. I've got Templar chilling, gathering the energy. And my army is pretty impressive. And like I said, Spades really just concerned with this last final push. And those upgrades are cutting him to pieces, by the way. That's what you're seeing here. Okay, so to wrap up that game, again, I do apologize that it's not a closer game, so we don't have quite the example of where those decisions really shine, but the idea here is let's show him our hand, okay? Let's show him what we're working with, and then let's move away from that. Let's force the Terran player to play ball on our half of the court. I want him to be saying, is he going Colossus? Is he going Templar? Do I have to worry about Dark Templar? I want to keep him on the edge of his feet, and that's where... on the edge of his seat. Yes, on the edge of his seat. So edge of the feet could work as well, I guess. The idea here is, again, Double Forge forces him to either be reactive with his own upgrades or to try to be proactive in cutting me off before I get to those optimal upgrades. If I hit 2-2 and he doesn't have any upgrades to speak of, like in this game, I could go pure Zealots probably and win that game. Even though by themselves are not that great, they're still pretty good, don't get me wrong. The idea that they're taking so little damage means that it's going to be a really big uphill battle for him. Now, if I ever get to 3-3, everything becomes unstoppable, and it's just ridiculous. But that's the nice little sands of time kind of timer we can place on our opponent by putting economical pressure on them, as it were, by saying, hey, I'm going Double Forge. You've got about 10 minutes to do something about that, and if you don't, you're dead. And there's a little kind of mind games like that going on as well. Like, you saw Colossus? Cool, you should make a bunch of Vikings. When secretly, I'm actually going Charge with Double Forge and Templar. If he shows up but he doesn't have Ghosts for my Psionic Storm, I think we all know what happens when Templar are going up against a Terran army that has no Ghosts. It is a glorious, festive day in Ire for all us Protoss players. So those are the decisions I want to see more Protoss players making, and those are the reasons why I want to see more Protoss players making them. But just to wrap up a few of the minor points that I made as well, make sure and have that probe out on the map. I want you warping in on thirds. I want you scouting thirds. I want you to have the ability to drop Templar around the map for feedback, or even just that go-to Psionic Storm for an army that's just passing on by. Play the guerrilla warfare, Protoss players. This is how we are going to win more games. Hopefully this has been really informative for you guys. I'm starting to trip on my tongue a little bit, so I apologize, but if any of you guys watch me on my shows or your stream, you know I have a high chance of doing that. Anyways, thank you very much. Show some love to Beyond Gaming. Head over to www.beyondgaming.com. Also check out myeg.net for some more Evil Geniuses good stuff, and I hope to see you guys soon.